Piece in the New York Times today, will a federal judge break up Google? As a side note, I love that the name of the judge presiding over the Google trial is Judge Mehta.
Is it really?
Yes. It's spelled differently. It's spelled Mehta.
That's great.
But,
Can't make that up.
I really hope that the guy who's presiding over the Meta trial is like Jim Apple or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't think it is, but I do enjoy that there's a Judge Mehta that is presiding over the Google trial. So anyways, Google last summer had an antitrust trial that they lost. They lost it in August of last year. And so there is now a 3-week hearing that started today to help decide on the remedy for what actually has to happen to Google since they lost that. So the Justice Department wants the judge to break Google up by basically forcing them to sell off their browser, Chrome. And remember, if you're running through someone's internet browser, they get a ton of information about every single website that you visit. And they also want Google to have to hand over some of the data that they have to other companies in the space. In response, Google has asked the judge to slightly restrict its ability to make deals, such as the fact that Google is the default search browser on all Apple devices. So, or not search browser, but search engine on Apple devices. So there's a little bit of a difference of opinion here in terms of, what each side thinks should happen. And I'm really curious to see what is actually decided here, just because, again, we haven't had a big antitrust case and an antitrust remedy in decades in the United States. You've had all these small little ones on, when Staples tried to buy Office Depot, that got shot down, and you're like, okay, so you're not going to let them merge with each other, but meanwhile, Amazon's eating both their lunch anyway, so what are we really doing here? But this, I think, is really interesting to see what could happen and where this company ends up.
It might be exciting if you're a shareholder. You suppose the most extreme remedy here is the breakup, right?
Yes.
In which case, go ahead. You were going to say
no.
Something
Keep
probably
talking.
better.
No.
Sure?
I was just looking at you. I wasn't talking.
All right. So the most extreme remedy would be the breakup.
Yep.
In which case you get a pro rata share. So you're a shareholder right now in one company, but that company is going to get broken up. A simple example might be, Android is worth half the business and search is worth half the business.
Sure.
So there are other channels that are other business
sure.
lines that I'm ignoring, but you get 2 stocks for every one you had before. They will have independent boards of directors, management, and the opportunity to grow, presumably in ways that they couldn't before, because they're no longer worried about, they no longer got the government breathing down their neck. So
sure.
For an existing share, I don't know what happens. I Googled quickly to see if there was any empirical, if there was any data on this. I did actually Google.
You did?
Yeah, I don't trust AI. Won't necessarily source what. Anyway, different topic.
Yeah.
So it could be kind of exciting for you if you're a shareholder. The growth prospects could be greater. I don't know what happens to earnings multiples, like PE and stuff like that, on the shares of the broken up company. Because again, you get, in my little example, you get 2 shares for every one you've got. They're both worth half as much at first.
Sure.
But their growth prospects might be better as individual entities.
Could be better, could be worse. You don't know.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to look at the bright side here. If you own it right now, you're confident in growth prospects and in management, presumably. I'm talking about somebody that owns the stock individually, not through an index fund or something like that. So it's not necessarily the end of the world. And there are probably lots of examples of companies that more than prospered, children companies, those that came out of a breakup that were more highly valued than they were before.
I mean, if you want examples of this, look no further than Boeing, United Airlines, United Technologies. We covered last week how those all were spun off.
Right.
It actually ended up being 1935, I think I looked up. But they all were spun out because of a push from the federal government that the operators of airlines should not also be involved in the manufacture of airplanes. And things turned out pretty well over the next 80 years for all 3 of those companies, as it turned out. So it's not necessarily a given that a breakup is inherently a bad thing for shareholders. It may be, it may not be, but you never really know. I still think if you wanted to get really interesting with this, don't spin off. I mean, look, you can spin off, a specific product if you want, but I say spin them off by geography and then let them compete to expand into each other's geography and see who does it best. It's way harder to try to do that because I hear the listeners being like, Chuck, how are you going to spin off like Google Boston from Google like Raleigh Durham? And the answer is you just say, look, this is your selling area. You have to like segment your operations in the next year so that you're only selling in this area and then split up, this way. And then you guys can compete into each other's territory and see what happens. I think it would be wild to see what they end up coming up with, but I don't think that's what's actually going to happen. More likely than not, you're going to end up with some meeting in the middle here where it's probably some restrictions on how they can do business. Maybe they end up spinning off one part of it. I don't know, but I just think it's interesting that we actually have an antitrust remedy to discuss and not just why won't anyone do anything about antitrust. It's exciting to me.
Yeah, as investors, there are other implications too. Like, will they all be held in an index of leading companies like the S&P 500? Will they all qualify? S&P makes that determination somewhat subjectively.
Yeah.
So there'll be a lot of it. I'm not saying I'm hoping for this outcome, but it will be an interesting little exercise.